Hi, I'm Tom Eschen, the host of the Power and Politics podcast. Thanks for joining us once again for the conversations that go beyond the 5 to 10 second soundbite, getting into really what issues impact New Yorkers the most. And today, unfortunately, we have to put a compilation together as we launched this segment back in the month of March. And we've had some great guests along the way, but someone that we didn't have that was on our list and what we wanted to have was Dr. Alice Green, who of course passed away at the age of 84 just a few weeks ago now. And Dr. Green had such a legacy. She made the most of her 84 years. And I was lucky enough to sit down with her quite a few times in the course of the last couple of years that I've been here in Albany. And it never was just a 5-minute interview. It was more so a 15, 20-minute conversation about really impactful issues impacting all of you out there today. So we put together some of the archives here, some of the conversations you might not have heard before in a compilation for you to listen to and hear her perspective on what she had to say. Topics like reparations, incarcerated individuals, and bail reform. So we hope you enjoy this listen, and please look at our website, cbs6albany.com, or you can subscribe on YouTube or on our podcast channel.
We've seen here at the center people who would have gone to jail, but because of the bail reform, were able to stay in the community, keep their jobs, take care of their families, and have an opportunity to get their lives together rather than putting them in jail. And there, as I said, there's no connection between that and violence. So we're really troubled by legislators who do not see that, do not pay attention to the research that's out there, and it's very, very clear. And we've talked about this research, and they seem to, take a blind eye view towards it. But we can destroy people by putting them in jail. This is an equity issue. Why should people who have the money be allowed to do whatever and to be out on the streets, and people who have no money will be sent to jail? So for us, it's an equity issue. It's also a constitutional issue. You should be held innocent until proven guilty. And so to put people in jail, to put them in this situation when no one has found them guilty of anything, is certainly a miscarriage of justice.
Yeah. And some of the, like you said, some of the law enforcement, some of the people on the other side talk about repeat offenders and things like, oh, this person 5 times in a row, they've been let out. What would you say to them, in response to that, in terms of how they tie that also to the bail reform, them getting out and not being in a jail to keep them there? Yeah. That was something that the governor also
It's also, that happens in very few cases. And we should be thinking about how do we deal with those people in terms of providing support and help for them, rather than saying everybody now has to go to jail because someone thinks that they're going to be repeat offenders. And the research does not show that to be the case. As a matter of fact, it shows to be the opposite, that people who are released back into the community who could have gone to jail and gotten services in the community do very well.
Do you think that the judge should have to, or should be, is up to them to assess danger? You were talking about someone being dangerous. Should it be up to them to determine that and whether or not they should be free on bail or not?
Yeah, well, again, that's a very difficult issue. Yeah. Because the judges have this discretion already. They can do that. We're not taking anything from judges, and they can make those kinds of decisions. Again, no one can predict, but
it's up to their judgment,
it's
right?
It's a judgment thing. Yeah. But we don't want them to come up with all of these ways of trying to determine who is dangerous and who is not, because they always end up being racially discriminatory. You're dangerous because you have two former convictions. Chances are you're going to be a black or brown person, okay? And so that the disparity is always there. The inequity is throughout the system, and when we start messing with bail reform, we're just making it worse because we've come a long way. It's taken us a long time to get to the point where we are now. And to keep tinkering with the bail reform when we know that's not the problem. We should be focusing on all those social determinants of all kinds of behavior and trying to correct them rather than trying to focus on individual, it's a racial disparity issue, obviously. It affects more people of color when we start limiting who is available for or eligible for bail. It's always racially, determined kind of a reaction. We've had such positive things happen working with people who are incarcerated and who have re-entered our community. I've worked in both inside and outside the prisons for about 35 years, and many of the people that I've run into, I learned so much from, and they did mentoring inside the prison, and a number of formerly incarcerated people have formed advocacy groups in the community, both especially in New York City and the other major cities, and here in Albany. So, you have SNUG, which is made up primarily of people who were incarcerated. They look for ways to re-enter the community and to be constructive. So I don't think we want to paint, anyone who's been rearrested with the broad brush for all people who have been formerly incarcerated, because there are many who contributed so much, and there have been thousands and thousands of people who have had their sentences commuted or they've been on parole, and against all odds, they managed to pick up the pieces of their lives and become members of their families again and the community. So we have to be very, very careful when we think about individual cases that we don't expand it to, as I said, paint a picture of everyone.
You mentioned, getting together and forming groups and finding these organizations. I guess, how have you seen, including yours, why has that made such a difference for the people you worked with?
Well, first of all, the Center for Law and Justice has hired a number of people over these years to work at our center. We find that they have an experience that's valuable, that they help us understand what led to whatever problems they had, and they are good at mentoring people, and especially young people. So we've done that with a large number of people over the years. So, but we also work with families of people who are incarcerated, and oftentimes they come, the people who are re-entering the community come with so much experience that I think everyone learns. We have got to get past our prejudgment stage and our stereotyping of people who've been incarcerated. People who've been incarcerated are people. And for whatever reason, some are guilty, some are innocent, but they're still people. And so they need to be treated as people, but they have to overcome so many obstacles in the community. There are people who do not want to hire them. We did a survey with Siena College a few years back. We asked business people, would you hire someone who has been incarcerated? And unfortunately, I think like 70% of them said absolutely not. And that poses so many problems in our community. We have to be open, because most of the time, even people who are incarcerated aren't necessarily incarcerated or prosecuted for something that they did while they're working. So it shouldn't reflect on how they can become constructive members of a business or of our community. So we've got to start thinking about them, and they promote the language. They've helped us understand the language of it all, because if you think of someone as an ex-con using that language, you're put off. And they're saying, whatever you call us people first. So we talk about not prisoners, but we talk about incarcerated people because they are people. And I think our society has to learn that, has to understand that nobody, I haven't met anyone who's perfect. And so I don't know why the expectation is that they're going to be. There are a lot of people in the system, of course, who need help and guidance. And that's what we ought to be thinking about. How can we do that? But there are a lot of very good, brilliant people who've been incarcerated and contributed so much. I think the issue of trust is very important. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where there is a difficult relationship between police departments and people who live in the community. That trust factor is not there. But with people who live there, who've experienced the criminal legal system, who've been incarcerated, I think a lot of young people listen to them because they can identify with them and they trust them. So, I think, but those people who are out there trying to do this work need as much support as they can get from the community. We must be willing to give them some space. We be willing to give financial support and other kinds of support to them because it's a big job and it's an important one. If we really care about public safety, I think we need to be supportive of the groups because they're the ones I think who will most likely be able to reach a young person or person in trouble. If I were in charge of training, one of the things I would do would go back and teach police officers the history of that relationship, particularly between African Americans and police.
Putting a group of people together to start discussing what reparations would look like in New York. What is your reaction to that as someone that's pushed for this for a few years now?
Yes, we've been working on this for many, many years. We think it's very important to have this conversation, and particularly now I think it's going to be something of great interest to people because we're now celebrating the Juneteenth in a little while. But I think it's really important because so many things that happen to people of color, black people in particular, stem from that period of enslavement. And there's little understanding and recognition of the impact that enslavement had and continues to have on African Americans. And it's significant. I mean, from poverty to segregation in housing, inability to leave things to your children, because you have to understand what was taken from African Americans. Their labor was taken from them, and an opportunity to build up a life that they could share with their families and leave something to their progeny. So I think having the bill will force us to at least acknowledge the continuing impact that enslavement has had on African Americans. And it's affected their education, level of education, and systemic racism came out of that period. Every time we've tried to do something to bring about some kind of reparations, it's been dropped. We know after the Civil War, we talked about 40 acres and a mule, for instance. That was totally eliminated. And other groups have called for reparations and been granted reparations. So why not African Americans? The Holocaust, there was some effort to provide reparations for those who were harmed, and that's good. Native Americans have gotten a little something from the federal government of reparations. The Japanese got reparations because of their internment during the Second World War. So there is a history of doing it. Why not for African Americans? Because it has affected all of us very deeply. So just for this society, this community, this state to acknowledge that enslavement still is having an impact on us through incarceration, poverty, and all of those issues that we're now dealing with. So this is a beginning, I see. The big thing is going to happen when we as a community, as a state community, start talking about how do you do it. That's the big issue, and whether it should be done in the first place. So we're always having to deal with issues around whether it's fair, how do you do it, why do we do it? All of that, will come into play. But the important thing, you've got to acknowledge, if we get not anything in reparation, but to acknowledge the impact that enslavement still is having on African Americans.
How do you think it should be done? You said that's the big question. How do you think it should be done?
You mean the conversation? Or
when you said, once we get to this conversation, you said the big question is how do they do it?
How do they do it?
How do you do it? Like, what do you think should happen here?
There's so many.
Like, it's because I'm curious. There's a lot of different avenues.
There's
right?
a lot of different avenues, absolutely. I know they're dealing with this in California right now. Sometimes they've done it through money, which is possible. And someone's been able to calculate what it would mean if you gave African Americans actual money, which I don't think that will happen, but it would be trillions and trillions of dollars. And I don't think that that will ever come to fruition. But I think that we can look at some of the major ways that African Americans are disadvantaged in our society, and I think it stems pretty much from the way they've been treated in this country, whether it's having housing. We can make sure that everyone has a house that's affordable. We can do that. We can make allowances for free education or reduce costs for whatever it happens to be. So those are two major ones. We can look at what we always look at, and that is enslavement, which I think follows from all of this, and try to find alternatives to dealing with criminal behavior by not putting people back into enslavement, because we see incarceration as another form of enslavement. And so those are some major things that we can look at and see how we can help people who are in situations that came out of that period of enslavement.
Healing, reconciliation, mentally and emotionally, can something like this have? And perception-wise, in addition to the financial and some of the discrimination that comes, how much is that a factor here too?
Absolutely. We have to understand that white supremacy, which is part of the period of enslavement, affected the ways that it affected African Americans. We came to believe that we were inferior, that we were not entitled to certain things because of our color and the enslavement experience. And so I think for us to really feel free, and I talk about this Juneteenth. I mean, that was wonderful that people learned that they had finally been freed, but that doesn't do a whole lot to change our situation. We've got to really be free, and psychologically, we have to believe that we are equal to white people, and we also have to find ways to make up for what was taken from us. So I think psychologically, it's one of the most important things, I think, for African Americans. We've never apologized for enslaving people, treating them like animals and taking away their labor. We've never apologized for that. But that doesn't do anything for us. What we need to do is come to feel that we are equal to everybody else.
Thanks for listening. Hit the subscribe button right now so you can stay up to date on these news-making conversations about the issues impacting New Yorkers the most: power and politics.